Welcome to the Inside Track on Real Estate with the Decker team. I'm Ken Decker.
And I'm Yetta Decker.
And together we form part of the Decker team.
Yes, and we're glad that you joined us once again. Today we're going to be talking about offers. The whole process of buying a home.
Okay, so you mean like a proposal of home ownership?
Yeah, that kind.
Okay.
That's perfect.
Great. So we've got a few categories that we've been asked about. And one of those is, one of the questions was, what types of scenarios brings multiple offers? And then the sub question, the B part of that was, how do you work when you get multiple offers on a property? And I think there's two sides of that coin. How does it work when you're a buyer in a multiple offer situation? And how does it work when you're a seller and you've got multiple offers? One's less stressful than the other.
Yeah, when you're the seller, I smile a lot, especially if you're my seller. If you're not my seller, it's a little bit more challenging. So we're going to focus on our sellers when we get multiple offers and the journey that you go through. And that is simply, we're going to work diligently to make sure that each offer is as good as it can get.
Okay.
Right? And so you pretty much, when you have multiple offers, most of the time, you're going to get asking or greater. Yep. Most of the time. Now, there are situations where that's not true, and I have seen it where it's a country property or something that's been on the market for a while or something that really doesn't maybe have the value to the buyers that the seller thought it would have. So even in a multiple offer scenario, it may not necessarily get full price or greater, and yet often it does.
Right.
Right? And so that's actually kind of a sweet spot. It's a great spot to be in as a seller because you know that you have no money left on the table. Right? You've gotten every dime you can get and probably the best terms, the best conditions. Sometimes they don't have conditions in them. Mm-hmm. And that's obviously a great thing. So multiple offers for a seller ensure, as long as we work it properly, which we do, I promise you at the Decker team, we go to great lengths to make sure that we're creating a fair system and a system where we're ensuring that we're getting everything we can get from those prospective buyers that are interested in purchasing the home.
Right.
What would you add to that, Ken? What have I missed?
Well, I think it's important that people understand that under our code of ethics as a realtor, that we're not allowed to share any of the information in offers with the other parties. So the only person that gets to see all the offers is the homeowner who's selling their house.
Right. And the realtor.
And the realtor.
Their realtor.
Yeah. And they're going to make decisions based on what's in front of them. So there's no sharing of, from one agent to the other agent, the buyer's agent. Oh, well, this offer is better. You better bring yours up. There's none of that. It's kind of like a sealed bid almost, where each buyer puts in their best offer, and then the seller decides if one of those offers is worthwhile to take, or sometimes they actually counter an offer. They might counter the best offer with the best terms or whatever, or maybe one offer's got something they like, the other offer's got another thing they like, and they'll counter one of them asking for, maybe it's a better closing date, or maybe it's more money, or maybe it's less conditions in the offer, or maybe it's a higher deposit. Right. There can be all kinds of things that the seller may choose to counter, even though they've gotten what they think is people's best offer.
Right, and the other thing that we'll often do is if we have multiple offers, we will go back to each person with just the question, is there any changes you'd like to make your agreement? Once we've had a chance to look at them all, then the seller may request that we go back and ask all of the people that. And we can do that. We do request, though, that the changes be in writing, because without them being in writing, we don't actually have an offer. So that's a really important piece for us. So often we'll have several offices full with different buyers in those rooms waiting to meet they don't actually meet our seller generally, however, willing to present the offers to us so we can take it to our seller.
Yeah, and the thing that's important to know is sometimes people will better their offer because right at the end, we're required to tell how many offers there are.
Right.
So maybe when they put their offer in, there was only theirs, or maybe they were only competing against one, and in the meantime, maybe 2 or 3 others have come in. So now they're saying, oh, I'm competing against 4 other people instead of 1 other person, and I really want this home, so I might make some changes in my offer now. Because it's kind of we think of it as an auction, but it's more like a silent auction. And it's not like the silent auction where you go to a charity event and you can see what the other person bid. It's a silent auction in that
with a closed bid.
you just, that's why I say it's more like a sealed tender. This is my best offer. And then sometimes, like I say, sometimes people will change and they say, it is my best offer, but I can get the house if I move my closing date 30 days later. I'm willing to do that. So there's that kind of tweaking that may happen.
Well, and sometimes it's even money. Even though we think it's the best offer, when we have the awareness that, hey, this could be not my house tomorrow.
Or the counteroffer comes back at 1,000 or 2 more or something.
Or 10 or 20.
And they make a decision. Oh, so I can have the house if I take this right now. And so sometimes that happens. But generally, most of the time, you put in your best offer that you're willing to walk away from.
Yeah, because if you don't, you kind of wish that you had sometimes, right?
Yeah.
If you don't put in your best up front, that's as a buyer.
As a buyer. And as a buyer, the worst thing that happened is, you find out that the house sold for $2,000 more than what you were willing to pay or thought you were willing to pay. And you go, well, I would have paid that. Well, you only get one chance, typically.
Typically, yeah. So now we've talked mostly from a seller's perspective, Ken. So from a buyer's perspective, how do I have to think and what do I have to know and do in the case of a multiple offer?
Well, first of all, you need to know how many offers there are. And then you want your realtor to really do a good job of showing you the value of the property. And you got to know the value of the property to you. There was a case where we sold a property for over $250,000 over asking price. There were 22 offers on the property, and somebody paid a lot of money for it. Now,
and some of the offers were actually below asking of the 22. So it wasn't like it was grossly underpriced.
Right.
Because then all of the offers, I presume, would have been asking or greater. So some, in fact, were under asking.
Now, the reason this person put the value so high wasn't because of the house was worth that. The property was.
To him.
To him, because he's a developer, he's going to build a big multi-unit building on it, and it was a larger lot that would allow him to do what he wanted to do. So suddenly that raised the value to him. So we're going to have an intimate conversation with the buyer as to what their end use is, what the value is to them, and what the true market value is. Because typically, if you're going to get multiple offers, it's usually because it's a very desirable property in a desirable area, or we've priced it low enough that it's actually below market value. And that's why everybody wants it. And sometimes that strategy can actually incur that you'll get slightly above market value, or at least the maximum the market will entertain. Because if you've got 5 buyers kind of putting in their maximum bid on your home, you're pretty much saying, I'm getting the top dollar that this property is worth anytime.
Yeah.
Like, unless you wait another 10 years or something. But at
In this
time,
market.
in this market, at this time and moment, you're getting the maximum that that property will bear.
Right. And so as a buyer, you don't want to get caught up in, hey, I'm in multiple, so now I'll pay anything to get the house. You do want to do it based on fact. So we're very diligent to show you what similar types, relevant property information, because there's nothing that's truly the same. I mean, in certain neighborhoods, we do have the same models, so that's a little bit easier to get almost comparable properties. And then in lots of areas, the best we're going to do is relevant property information. So you want to take that into consideration, use a bit of a scientific approach to arriving at the value, because history is, at least recent history, today's history in the last, say, 3, 4, 5, 6 months, and depending on how much the market is shifting, that data will provide you some great insight into the value of the property. And then, as Ken said, you also want to think about your specific use for it.
Yeah. And I think it's important to know that there's fewer multiple offers right now, that we're in a buyer's market. And primarily. And the reason, well, geographically, overall.
Yeah.
And the reason for that is buyers are less motivated because they know there's a lot of inventory out there. They can go buy another property that's going to give them similar usage. And so it's rare. Like I say, it's got to be a really great property in a great location, or something unique about the property that's going to create that multiple frenzy. Now, if there's very, very few houses on the market, then the top ones tend to get multiple offers all the time. And that's where you're in a hot seller's market.
Right, which we haven't been in for a few years now as a whole. There's certainly communities that's happened in specific houses.
Yeah.
Right. So if I'm putting an offer in on a property, we'll move from multiple offers
Yep.
to just general offers here. And how do I know, is a question I've had asked, if I'm putting in a lowball offer? What is a lowball offer?
Well, that's a good question. Typically, the houses in the Ottawa market, let's say last month, the residential freehold type properties sold at 2%, on average, 2% under asking price. Okay? So if you put in an offer that's 3% below asking price, that's probably a valid first offer, right?
Yeah, even 5%.
Yeah. Now, it all depends on where the property is valued to start with. Like if it's overpriced, now we got to put in what we call a lowball offer. We're going to put in an offer that's maybe 10 or 15% below asking, or 10 or 20,000 or whatever.
Right.
It depends on the size of the property. But we're going to put in a value that's lower. Now, when we call a lowball, is typically where it's much below even market value. Even if the house is priced at market value, and it comes significantly under, that's what we call a lowball offer.
Right. I would hesitate to call an offer that was low a lowball if, in fact, the value wasn't in the property.
Right. But the seller's still going to think
Yes.
it's a lowball offer.
Right. Even though it's not.
Yes.
Right. So that's where the analysis and really knowing your market, that's what over 20 years each experience in the industry, and all our team members have certainly well over half a dozen years of real estate experience out there pricing and negotiating agreements every single day. Right? They all know what market value is because they've sold hundreds and hundreds of homes.
Right.
And that's important because you will see the average buyer sees 5 to 12 properties before they make a decision.
Yep.
That's about it. I mean, the odd one sees 1 or 2 properties. The vast majority will see more like 5 to 12. And that's a pretty wide range, and yet that's not exhaustive of what the market is, right? Relative to the tens of thousands that we've all seen.
Yeah.
And so when we're helping with the pricing, do rely on us as your resource around that because there's significant value. It's not just based on gut and emotion and the last 4 sales. It's based on a lot of history.
Yeah. And so there's sometimes a reason for a lowball offer. And
Yeah.
usually if we're bringing a lowball offer, it's because the price is too high to start with.
So then we wouldn't call that a lowball, but the seller will think it's a
The seller will call it a
lowball.
lowball offer.
Right.
And so we have to do a lot of work to reframe their thinking on what the value of their property is. It happens significantly with for sale by owners because a lot of times they haven't had a realtor in to really set
Pinpoint.
the value.
Yeah.
And so they've picked one. I heard my neighbor put theirs up for this, or, you know, they don't have quite the number of tools and expertise that we do to really pinpoint the price. Now, if somebody, even if they're working with us and the value is in the property and they say, we want to give a lowball offer.
Right. A true lowball offer, meaning an offer below market value.
Yeah. It's difficult to get that accepted because the seller feels they're losing. And what normally happens, because they go, well, we can come up. Yes, you can. But sometimes putting in too low an offer actually insults the seller and they get their back up. They get angry. And then when you bring in a reasonable offer that probably would have bought the house, like if you come up to a reasonable offer, they don't want you to own their house. It gets personal, it gets emotional. And they say, no, I don't want that buyer to have my house. And I've seen it where we've given a low offer, or someone's given a low offer, and then we've come in and now they're in multiple offers. And even though they bring their offer up above what the second offer is, there's emotion attached and the seller will take the lower offer because they want them to own it, not you. It's interesting.
It
it's
is
really,
interesting.
really interesting.
If you're just joining us on the Inside Track on Real Estate with the Decker team, we've been talking about offers and offer process. We've covered a little bit about multiple offers, so, a fair bit, I guess. You might want to go back and watch that. And now we're just talking about the lowball offer. Who perceives it a lowball offer? When is it a lowball offer? And when do I make one of those? When ought I to make one of those?
Not very often.
Well, I don't know that that's true. Because there are times where the property is overpriced. So we've had a bit of a discussion about, is it a low ball if the property was just priced above market value and you come in at market value, even though the seller perceives it a low ball offer, is it really? Well, I guess that's an argument that has to be had sometimes.
Well, and sometimes it has to do with days on market. If you've got a property that's been on the market for 6 months, a year, and no one's bought it at the price it's at, it's probably overpriced.
Probably pretty
So when
good
you bring
clue.
in a lower offer, are you really bringing a low offer? Not really. And I would encourage a seller to really, really look at that. Because I always say there's two people buying the house. Even if you've got one offer, you got two people buying the house. And that's the person who brought the offer. And if the seller doesn't want to take it, what they're saying is, I'll pay more than what that buyer's offering to buy my house back. And so there's always two people in the bidding process, the seller and the buyer.
Always.
So it's kind of fun. Now, the other question we get is if I'm pre-approved for a certain amount, let's just throw out a number, 400 for instance.
Yeah.
How much leeway should I leave myself when making an offer? And I think what this person's really saying is, what value of houses should I look at? And what I usually say is if you're approved at 400, we really shouldn't be looking at houses more than that. Because let's say we look at 8 houses, and then there's one that, let's say we were looking up to 420, for instance, and there's one at 420 and we absolutely fall in love. And I go back and I do the appraisal on it, and that property, and appraisal's a
market valuation, a relevant property search, a pinpoint pricing analysis, a market snapshot.
So maybe I look at it and I go, wow, that property, the reason you really like it at 420 is it's undervalued. They put it 20,000 below what it should have been.
It should have been at 440.
Yeah. And so now my buyer wants to buy it, but they can only afford 400, and they're not going to get that house.
Right.
And now every house that they view from then on, they're going to compare to the house they didn't get.
Right. And so the only exception to that would sometimes be a lot of homes that are priced at 4.25 will in fact sell for 400.
They might, but it's a dangerous road to go down.
It's a dangerous game. So you just have to have an informed concept of, can you really go up if you want to, or are you prepared to know that you're kind of torturing yourself a little bit?
Yes.
Because that's the process that you're actually generating. Right. So you don't want to really go over your pre-approval, and really, why would you want to go right at your pre-approval? Now, that's an interesting thought I just had around that. Sometimes people will go into their financial institution, go to More Than Enough, which is one of the financial companies that we work with a lot, and tell them how much they want to be approved for. So it's not the max they can afford, it's their comfort level. Mm-hmm. So those are two very different conversations.
Yes. And if it's your comfort level, it's okay to look a little above that, because
often they'll come down anyway.
Yeah. And if they don't, you can still afford it if that's the property that you really, really want.
Right, then it makes sense. So what Ken's talking about is not going up above, is if you're absolute maxing yourself out, which we actually discourage you from doing. If you don't have to max yourself out with the interest rates, how low they are today, if they go up 1% and you're maxed out at the current interest rates, you're in trouble at renewal time, and we don't want that for you. So ideally, you're not going to max out your potential, right? Like, you don't want to go that tight if you don't have to. Sometimes with a first home, you do, because the alternative is you're renting for another 3 years or 4 years, and you're paying somebody else's mortgage. You'd rather be paying off your own mortgage, because with the interest rates the way they are right now, often in a mortgage payment, not too long into the process, about half of it's going into equity.
Almost right from the beginning.
right? Which is so exciting because at higher interest rates, that's not the case.
No, your payment's significantly higher, and most of it's interest and a little bit's principal. Right now, with the interest rate the way it is, pretty much half of your payment is like putting money in the bank because it's paying down your mortgage.
Yeah.
So that's phenomenal.
Well, it's incredible. So we're at like the best time ever, actually, to buy and or sell.
Especially with the inventory.
Phenomenal inventory. Such great inventory. So your pre-approval, you want to have gone through the entire process. So you've handed in your income statements, you've handed in your employment letters, you've done the work so that there are no surprises when the property and the property appraisal now becomes part of the application.
Right.
That's important.
Yep.
And around the pre-approval process in terms of how much below it should I go and all that, that's part of it too, because if you haven't done the detailed work, you might have surprises, and we don't want those. Right?
Yeah, so Yetta, why would someone offer more than the asking price?
Well, I think it goes back to the multiple offer scenario. There's demand for the property, and you have specific reason for really wanting that property. So that would be a great time to go over asking price. Another time you might go over asking price for the property is because it's just come on the market. You know it's exceptional value, and you don't want to get into the multiple offer scenario because you're pretty confident that it's going to get out of control. And so you may want to go at asking or more than asking right away, quick, in, out, because you know the values in the property. However, what else would you might do it?
You don't want to risk someone else coming in, so you give a fairly short, irrevocable time.
Provided you can.
Yeah, and you give them a great offer that they're going like, I'd kick myself if I don't take this, because maybe there's not another better offer coming later.
Right, even if it's tomorrow that's later. We don't know. So we did that recently with one of our clients where we've been looking for quite a while, very few properties in their price range in the community that was their really only choice. And so when a property came up, rather than playing hardball, we purchased it quickly that day, got it done, and it was a really good thing we did because he did get other offers the following day for a lot more money.
But sometimes the bird in the hand's better than two in the bush. So
Right.
if you've got a very good offer, then in that case, giving a low offer would have just destroyed their ability to
They
buy
wouldn't
that
have bought
property.
it. They
No.
never could have purchased it because they could not have
Right.
gone up as high as the other offers that came in later were.
Yes. Now, I've also given an offer over asking price when the realtor's done something which is like no offers till a certain time, or no showings till a particular time, and the property, I know the value was there. We've put in an offer at asking or above asking before we even see the property, and we just make it conditional on home inspection. And so that sometimes works. Sometimes the seller goes, no, I'm not willing to entertain it because you haven't seen my property. But other ones, it does work, and my buyer's been able to buy the property before even anyone else has seen it.
I know, isn't that cool?
And so sometimes strategies like that get our people a property that's actually undervalued. This particular one I'm thinking of was undervalued. And so we got it at full asking. And it was still $20,000 below market for that house.
Yeah, and so that's when we're working for a buyer. So the strategy in offer process really matters, and it shifts depending on who we're working for. Because if it's whatever client we're working for, we want to position them in their best, to the best interest of that client, right? So if you want our experience from an offer process, you'll want to call us the next time you are looking at purchasing a property or selling a property for that matter. And you can reach the Decker team at 613-860-4663 or of course at info@deckerteam.com and leave some great properties that are for sale.
And let me just tag on to what you said there.
Okay.
You know, it's much better if they get us in early in the process.
Oh, absolutely.
Rather than call us in at the last moment and say, hey, I've looked at a bunch of properties. There's one I saw at an open house or something. I want to put an offer and come negotiate on my behalf. That's tougher to do than if we've got a relationship and we've seen the other houses with them. And also, not that we can't do it.
Yeah,
Generally,
we've
what
done
we're
pretty
going to
well
do is
with
we're going to
that.
book a showing.
Yeah.
Because we want to see it before we negotiate. Because how can we really counsel you as a buyer if we haven't physically been in the property to see the condition, any pitfalls, look at the surrounding neighborhood, what kind of properties around it, what it's zoned for. There's a lot of research that goes in to us guiding our buyers as they're working under buyer representation before we actually present an offer.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think that's important. Now, I do have a property I'd like to talk about since you
Okay,
brought
I
it
knew
up.
you did.
Yes. This is a real gem. And specifically, if you're thinking, hey, I would love to open up a pub or some other type of business. This
Food services.
Food services, or could be like a gift shop
retail,
or
yeah.
craft shop or that kind of thing. This property is a gem. It's a beautiful red brick building with a huge veranda around.
It's charming.
It's charming.
Yeah.
It's,
Which means it's old too.
it's old.
It's
over
old
100
and
years
charming.
old. It's well maintained.
Yeah, it is.
I had a shingles redone on the roof recently, and it's valued at a very good price. And what do I say is a very good price? Well, somebody bought it about 8 years ago for $330,000. And since then, they replaced the shingles and did some other work on the property and put in a full custom bar, like for a pub, and put in some restaurant equipment. Some of the restaurant equipment's come out, but a lot of it's still there, the washers and things like that. And we have it listed for sale today, 8 years later, at $325,000.
Wow.
Yeah, $5,000 less than they paid for it 8 years ago.
And it's had upgrades.
Yes, absolutely. So it's priced really
Wow.
aggressively, and it's in the town of Smiths Falls.
Yeah.
Pretty much right downtown. It has a view of the locks, so a view of the Rideau River there and the locks, and it's ready for somebody that maybe wants to do a craft beer house, like a craft brewery. The basement's got some room to do that. It's a walkout basement actually on the side, so it's awesome. And yeah, so for somebody that wants to be entrepreneurial, and the other thing that's fantastic, it's got two-bedroom apartments, one on the second floor, one on the third floor. So it has income to cover a lot of the expenses of the property. As a matter of
Or
fact,
you could even live there.
No, you can't. On the main level, has to be a business.
No,
You could live upstairs.
Upstairs.
Yes. But on the main level,
'Cause
you have
that's
to have a
what-
business because it's
Yeah,
commercial.
that has
zoning.
happened. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, in one of the units.
Yeah, you could live upstairs and work right downstairs. Oh,
The
that
commute would be good.
awesome, wouldn't it?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, great minds
Yeah.
think alike. That's awesome. And so for $325, I expect the phone to be ringing right after this show.
Off the hook.
And they want to call 613-860-4663 and talk to one of the Decker team.
Thanks for joining us on the show, the Real Estate Show. The
Inside
Inside Track on Real Estate. Have a great day.